we've established the fact that objects can, and most times do, have a prototype object from which that object can borrow or inherit properties. Now, since a prototype object is also an object, it makes sense that it could also have a prototype object. This creates what we call a prototype chain. Objects linked together in a chain-like fashion. Let's first look at this in code, and then we'll look at a graphic representation to make sure that we understand how these objects all link together in a prototype chain. All right, for this current document, I've created an array, simple array, and also an object. I have both of these so that we can look at them in the console. And then I'll do some more things here in the code file and just see what happens. So first thing we're going to do is open up that console so we can take a look at these. Okay, so let's first take a look at the array. Now, if I open that up, as we've done in the past, we see that there is a prototype attached to that, and that happens to come from the array constructor. However, if we further open this and then scroll down, so now we're looking at the object that is the prototype to that array, and we go further down within that object, we can see all the methods that are available for arrays, but further down we also have a link to another object, which is the prototype of the prototype. So this is our prototype chain that we're talking about here. So we can see that represented here in the browser. Let's use the get prototype of to also take a look at that. So if I do object get prototype of and enter the array, this is the object that is the prototype. All of those methods should look familiar. There's methods, those are methods that are available on arrays. All right, now let's go one step further. So I'm going to do object.get prototype of, and then inside of that I'm going to put object.get prototype of again. So we'll first get the prototype here of the array, and then we'll get the prototype of that prototype object. And it should show us the third one we were looking at. So if I open that up, notice what we have here. Constructor has on property is value of, all of that. So if we were to go down and down and then one more time, that's basically what we're seeing here. So it is the prototype of the prototype. That creates what is called a prototype chain. Now in that code, I'd also created an object. So I want to show that really quick. So if I enter obj and then I open that up, the prototype of that is exactly like the prototype of the array prototype. So with an array, when we create an array, it receives a prototype that comes from the array constructor. Well, that prototype receives a prototype that comes from the object constructor. And that's the same object we're seeing here. So eventually, as you go up the prototype chain, all objects will go to the same end prototype. And that's the prototype that is attached to the object constructor. And so all objects will have access to the value of method, for example. I can type arr.value of, and it works. It looks first for that method on the array. Can't find it there, so it looks for it on the prototype object. Can't find it there, so it looks for it on the prototype of the prototype object, and eventually finds it there. Now, if it can't find it on the final prototype object that is in the prototype chain, then it would return undefined, or it would give an error saying that's not a method, it can't do anything with it. All right, now let's go a little bit further here. Let me go ahead and create another object. I'm going to call it obj2. And this object's going to have a single method on it. It's just going to be full name is the method. And what is this method going to do? It's going to return basically this dot fname and concatenate that with a space and then this dot lname. That's what it will return. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make this a prototype of another object, because I want to take a look and see what happens when we set the prototype of an object. See if we still have that prototype chain that we talked about. So let's go ahead and set up obj3. And here is a command used to create an object and at the same time attach a prototype. It's called object.create. It's a static method on the object constructor. And what we do is inside of parentheses here, we pass in the object that we want as the prototype object for this object we're creating. So obj3 will have this as its immediate prototype. So obj2 here. Now, when I save that and I look at obj3 on the console, there's nothing in the object, but it does have a prototype. Notice what's in the prototype, the full name method. And then that keeps going up the prototype chain as well. Now let's add something to obj3. Let's add an fname and an lname property. So obj3.fname there's the first name, obj3.lname, and this is going to be our last name. There we go. Now we have both of those in. So now let's save that. Let's jump to the console again. Now this time if I enter obj3.fullName, what's going to happen? It will look for it on obj3. It can't find it there, so it looks for it on its prototype object. It finds it there, does what's need to, and returns the full name for us. Now we just talked about value of, which is found on the final prototype object when we're moving up a prototype chain. That's available here for us in this self-defined JavaScript object. And basically it prints out the value of. It has to move up the prototype chain in order to find that. So it can't find it on obj3, it can't find it on its prototype object, which is obj2. This one here, it can't find it there. So where it finally finds it is on the object.prototype prototype. That's where it finally finds it, the prototype of the object constructor. So we've talked about that from a code perspective. Let's look at how that is represented using an image, just so I can make sure that this is concrete in your mind. This is an important concept to grasp. So let's take a look at a graphic that will illustrate that. So here we have represented obj3 has the fname and lname property, and then we have its prototype object represented obj2, and then we have the prototype of that, which is the prototype assigned to the object constructor, object.prototype. That is up here. That's where value of is found. So when I enter obj3.value of, it first looks in the obj3 object. Can't find it there, so moves to its prototype. Can't find it there, moves to its prototype, finds it there. And it would continue up that prototype chain. This happens to be the end of the prototype chain. So if it didn't find it here, then it would give an error indicating that it could not find that function, or that value of is not a function. And so that's how the prototype chain is used by the JavaScript engine to borrow properties from an object's prototype. And this illustrates that it's not just the initial object prototype, but it can be the prototype of the prototype. It can go up that prototype chain to find and borrow those properties. All right, let's move on to the next topic.